Welcome back to Confessions of a Leader. I'm Ian Pascoe, the CEO and Managing Partner of Grant Thornton in Thailand. On this podcast, I speak with accomplished leaders across industries to uncover their leadership journeys, their hard-won lessons, and the decisions that shape their careers. My guest today is Abhijit Datta, a seasoned executive with over 3 decades of experience leading finance, operations, and international expansion across Asia. He most recently served as Managing Director of SCG International, where he helped transform the company into a global supply chain partner with operations in over 50 countries. From green logistics and low-carbon cement to business expansion in Saudi Arabia, Abhijit's leadership has consistently aligned growth with sustainability and innovation. Abhijit, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah.
Really good to have you here. You've had an interesting life, fascinating life. I'd like to spend a little bit of time with you this morning going through your life and some of the major decisions that you made and how you've ended up, I guess, being here with me today in Bangkok. So you started your life as a chartered accountant.
That's correct.
Back in India.
Yes.
Then you went through Tata,
Right.
which is, I guess, is probably one of the, certainly then was the largest Indian company, probably still is it?
Yeah, it's one of the top, correct.
In multiple areas. But then we got to 95.
Yeah.
Tell us about your decision making in 1995.
Right.
Because that's why you're here.
Yeah. So let me start first of all by thanking you, Ian, for having me, for inviting me on the podcast. So I started working at age 21, and I completed my chartered accountancy, which is the equivalent of the CPA here. The chartered accountancy is along the lines of the British system. And then I worked for the first 10 years in the Tatas, and that was quite stable. But at the end of that, I was looking for a change, and I had 2 options. One was a very well-known multinational. It was HP in India, a good position. And the other was in Thailand, which is a completely unknown country for me. I had friends and relatives who had been traveling in those days and staying in the West, but none to Thailand, so I knew very little about it. I had known about the fact that it was one of the Asian tigers, but that's about all. And I looked at those 2 options, and I chose the one with more uncertainty, which is to come here to Thailand.
That's bold.
Yeah. And since then, this has really been the story of my life, which is that I have change has come to me in a very high frequency. Every 2 or 3 years, there have been events, some of them more dramatic than the others. But what I've ended up doing is I've embraced the change, and I've actually benefited every time from that change. And so here I was in January of 1995, a completely foreign country, a foreign language, a foreign environment, different from what I had seen. But I was actually loving every minute of it. I was like a little baby. My curiosity was completely aroused, and I was trying to learn what's going on. Everything was so different. The way of life was, people were very simple, and the way of life was totally different. And then after a couple of years, I actually doubled down on that decision to go for an uncertain option, which is in my personal life when I decided to get married. And with Grace, today I have a lovely family. My wife is Thai. I have 2 lovely kids. And since then on, here I am, a resident in Thailand for the last 30 years. But the thing that I'd like to stress on is that since then, every single assignment that I've worked on, and I've had about 10 roles in 4 different companies over the last 30 years, in multiple cultures, and we can talk a little bit about that as we go along. But every single role that I did, change was a very key overriding criteria for success. So all of those roles you could look after, you could take care of the marketing, you could take care of you could have the people management, you could focus on quality, you could do all of those things, but you're still not going to succeed unless you were able to drive change. The change was really the key. And that's really been the overarching, I would say, story in my journey for the last 30 years.
bold move to come to Thailand, and then your career has had all these changes. Does this reflect perhaps your younger life? We always sort of quite adventurous when you were young, because it's been quite adventurous what you've done. Were you always the adventurous type growing up?
Not really, except that I was in boarding school.
Right.
And when you're in boarding school, in our case, I was away from my home for about 10 months in a year. You just got about 2.5 months of holidays when you went back with your parents. And I did that for most of my student life. And you were in a very independent situation. There's nobody to come and tell you that you got to finish your homework and you got to get your tests right, and or you're actually in bad company, and you got to look around. Well, what's the kind of company you're keeping? All of those decisions have to actually be taken by yourself, and I guess that is something that helped me later on. It gives you a lot of confidence later on in life, because right from a very early stage in your childhood, you've had to take decisions by yourself. But I was not adventurous, no. I was not the sporty types, so I didn't. I used to love cricket, as most Indians do. But I was horrible at the sport, at playing. Right. So no, I was not the sporty types, no.
But you like new things.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's the change, driving change in organisations.
Absolutely.
Do you get bored easily bored with the status quo? Or are you just looking for something better?
Looking for something better. And when something better comes to me, I've been very lucky that it has come with a pretty high level of frequency. Then for me, I see it as the dark side of change and the bright side of change. They're both. And the dark side of change is all about the uncertainty that it's going to bring, the disruption. I mean, you're in the status quo, it's a comfortable situation that's going to get disrupted. And there's this fear, right? There's the fear that you're going to give up something that you're familiar with. But once you've thought about it, and it's just like risk management, so you manage those risks and say, am I well prepared for the worst case scenario, right? For example, when I came to Thailand, for me, the worst case scenario was that I wouldn't pick up the language. As I said, if I didn't pick up the language, then I would find it almost impossible to integrate with the society and do the kind of roles that I was going to do. And that, for me, that worst case scenario was I would have to just go back. But once I thought about that, then all that remains is the bright side of change.
Yes.
And that is the promise that this change offers, the opportunity that it brings in, all of the new things, and also personally the leap that it offers you, which otherwise would not be there. You'd probably be growing organically, but here's this change that if it works out the right way, then you actually make this big leap, and it's happened for me pretty often, and I'm really grateful for that.
Okay. So just going through so listeners can understand your journey. You came to Thailand with a rubber producer.
Correct.
Rubber products producer.
Correct.
Be specific, I think it was with Ansell.
Correct. It was acquired by Ansell later on, yeah.
Yes, acquired by Ansell, which at the time was the largest condom manufacturer in the world.
Correct. Yeah.
Did you get any... How did you go about talking to your friends about that? Was there any comments?
Yeah, so it is actually a much more serious product.
Sure.
Than that it appears to somebody who doesn't know about it, because first of all, this product has lots of SKUs, and I don't want to get into why. Yes. But it does have...
We don't mention.
And that itself makes production planning and the entire supply chain and logistics planning and the packaging, the branding of it, quite a complex matter. Also, the product is... It moved from a population control device in the early stages into becoming a life-saving device because of HIV/AIDS, correct? So that being the case, FDA in the US and in most of the countries would be monitoring this very closely. And so quality became extremely important So with all of that, it was it was a very interesting product. But more about the company, Ian, if I may.
Yes.
So the company was both the first two companies that I worked in. They eventually got sold, and they were companies that had some similarities, including the company with the rubber products, which is that they were they were having cash losses. And it was really a challenge even to turn the wheels, which is to operate on a daily basis. And I had come from a finance background and not always worked in profitable companies. So this was a huge challenge for me, and it was something that I really wanted to experience because I wanted to learn how to manage that. And I still remember the entire operation started with the latex farmers in the south of Thailand. Yes. They would be supplying liquid, it's called concentrate latex. That's the raw material. And then the entire production process would start. And that has to be paid in cash. So those trucks would appear, and either you have the cash and keep the wheels turning, or you don't, and they go back and with the possibility never to return again. Yeah. So that was a huge challenge, and I was tasked with this role of trying to make sure that we can raise funds. And I still remember the first Songkran. So I came to Thailand in January, and the first Songkran, I actually missed that Songkran because I was busy preparing the business plan, because I'd committed to the bank that I'd be coming to you with a proper business plan, and we needed to raise those funds. And every time I walked into a bank here in Bangkok, it was this image of those latex trucks always in my mind that if this didn't go well, then some farmer would probably not be paid. And so that initial experience was extremely valuable for me. And eventually, I think in both of these early stage companies, the entire management team, I was the number 2 at that stage. I was not in the number 1 position. I was CFO. And they were eventually, we steadied the ship. So the operation stabilized, we professionalized the management, and the companies eventually got sold to very good companies.
Right. You then moved from there to SCG, briefly?
So what happened was in the second company, which eventually got sold. So that was Phoenix Pulp and Paper.
Phoenix, right, yes.
And eventually got acquired by SCG. So that's how I...
Right, so you ended up with SCG.
Yeah.
That was an interesting time for Phoenix as well, wasn't it? Because that was around the same time that Asian Pulp and Paper had its problems.
Yes.
Was there any effect on Phoenix from the challenges around APP?
Not really from ABP. It's a huge global market, but Phoenix had its own challenges.
Yes.
There was before I joined, there was a management dispute, which is out in the public domain actually, and the company was deeply in debt. So there was all of that. But when I joined with the new management team, then the immediate task was recovery, to recover the company completely from a high debt situation into debt free, which we eventually did. Bring it back to profitability and
professionalize
the management and all of that.
So you're gone from profitable companies to 2 in a row that were challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
Which was also going through. That was around the Tom Yum Goong.
Yes, 97. Yes.
Which is what brought me to Thailand.
That's exactly. Yeah, I know about that. Yeah.
We sort of came at the same time.
Yeah.
Or you actually came in at the end of the good times. I just arrived in the bad ones.
Yeah.
Following there, you with SCG, and obviously that's a massive conglomerate. You then went back to ISS.
Yes.
Which is, I guess, a different industry again.
Absolutely.
And then later on back to SCG. So you've been through a number of industries.
Yes.
As well as a number of countries.
Right.
What has there been a sort of common values or principles that you've always been driven by in no matter what situation, whether the profitable companies, distressed companies, different industries, different countries? Is there a common value that's always driven you?
Yeah, so one of them was, of course, embracing the change.
Yes.
Which is the ability or the focus on what was at stake and why the change was so important and how I was going to play a role in bringing that about. But I always had passion, passion to make an impact and to do something that would actually create value. And to do it with uncompromising integrity, of course. So those values have always kind of stayed with me. But to answer your question more directly about how I managed all of this diversity in the different backgrounds, the cultures, and the kind of industries that I worked in, for me, adaptability was extremely important, and that actually goes back, I guess, to my childhood because. For an average Indian speaks about 3 to 4 languages.
Right.
That's pretty normal. And you do have a childhood and an education, a period of very high competitiveness. For an average Indian. And so having gone through that, I think adaptability was something that was extremely important to me, and that I think I carried throughout my career. Yeah.
Which I guess is coming back, looking at your whole chain, looking at businesses, looking at your environment, looking at everything, and looking for better ways.
Right.
Okay. You didn't start necessarily in leadership roles, but you've obviously, in the last 20, even 30 years, you've been very much in leadership roles.
Right.
What have you evolved as a leader, and how have you changed your style through that leadership journey?
Yeah.
Looking at the various growth within the companies, how is your leadership, and what sort of lessons would you give leaders coming through now?
Right. So in the early stages, just to simplify it, so in the last 30 years, I could categorize it into two groups. The first 15 years, I was in the number 2 position. So I was a CFO or in the leadership team, but not the number 1. But in the latter 15 years, I took on CEO level roles. In those first 15 years, I was influenced a lot by John Maxwell's definition of leadership, which is leadership is influence, nothing less, nothing more. It's not the title, it's not the position, because that doesn't help you create an impact. What actually creates the impact is the influence. So, for example, I joined one of the company. I'm not going to name the company, but one of the first things that I would do when I joined these companies was to try and understand the dynamic of what goes on in this company. How do things get done here, right? And every company, including yours and mine, there is a dynamic. There is a way in which things get done. There's somebody who has a louder voice than the others, and there are ways in things get done faster or slower or whatever. And in this particular company, what I noticed very quickly was when I would talk to my boss with a new idea, even if he agreed with it, he wouldn't act on it unless he was sure that the entire leadership team is firmly behind this and is fully aligned. And so I quickly learned that, and instead of then shooting off for his room, what I would do is I would then talk to my colleagues. And for example, one of the first things that we wanted to do in this company was to integrate the functions, the back office functions like finance and planning and all of that, which were all in different business units. And as you know, no business unit wants to, the business unit is something like an empire, right? You don't want to get rid of the functions that you're responsible for. And so you have to work together with them to see where the win-win is. And make sure that you have convinced them that combining these functions together is actually going to add more value, not just to the company, but even to them personally. And having done that, you then go to your boss and say, okay, this is what we want to do. And then, he just acts on it immediately. So that is something that I learned, that influence is You don't necessarily use your position, your title, but you develop, you understand the dynamic, and you develop a way by which you can actually influence the decision.
You've talked a bit about change, driving change through an organisation. Obviously, it needs to come from the top.
Yeah.
But how do you get, I guess, the lower ranks within the organisation to embrace change, to come on that change journey?
Right.
We've both probably been in situations where we get resistance to change.
Right.
In fact, I think there's a book about the immunity to change. People generally don't like change.
Right.
So how do you get people under you to come along because you need them to help you with that change,
right,
to help drive that change? How do you do that?
I think the way I start is, for me, the biggest struggle is with myself. I have to first of all convince myself that I know what the change that I'm trying to drive. When I say that I have a vision, then I can very clearly say, first of all, to myself, what that looks like. What does change look like? So I'm trying to drive a change, and I'm trying to create a picture for the company 2 years, 3 years away from now. What does that actually look like? And once I have understood that, then it's a question of communicating that. And when you communicate that, there's always going to be, the companies that I work, there's going to be people who resist that and people who embrace that. And the ones who resist that, they're not resisting it because they don't want to do it. They're resisting it because they actually fear something. They have a genuine reason. And I think as a leader, it's important for me to first of all understand what that reason is. And if I were in their shoes, then what is it that I would do? So for example, a typical issue in many companies might be the core business, which needs to be protected, versus the new generation, next generation businesses that also need to be explored. Now, when you have to focus on the next generation businesses, but when you do that, you obviously, to a certain extent, demotivate those that are actually earning the money from the core businesses and say, okay, these guys are just exploring stuff. Right. They're investing. They're not even making any money, whereas we are actually bringing all the cash for the company. And the key is for the core business people to really understand that this is important, not only for the company, but it's also going to eventually bring value for them. It is a challenge. I'm not going to say that it's easy. It's a concept that I think Harvard calls ambidexterity. Right. Corporate ambidexterity, the ability for a company to do these two things at the same time, which require totally different skills, totally different mindsets, actually. One is an execution mindset, mm-hmm. where you already have a stable business model, you have good customers, you have a strong market, and you just got to execute and perform and deliver the results. The other is what we're talking about right now, this change, uncertainty, exploring that, getting excited about the promise and finding out these new things. They're both important. Right. But how do you make sure that within the same organizations you have both these groups of people and they're equally aligned? They realize that they have different roles to play, but they're all doing it for a goal that is absolutely clear.
And if you come across a person, a group of people that are really resistant and just don't want to come on that journey, what do? Do you try and turn them? Do you push them aside? What would you do where you basically get a group that just don't want to change, don't want to accept that things need to be different?
That would depend, Ian, on whether that's after I've made my efforts, right? Mm-hmm. So initially I would start making those efforts. Let's say I've done what I could, and I still have this group of people that just don't want to come on board. The first thing I would do is to make sure that they are not in a position to influence things. Because if that's the case, then that's a bottleneck right there. I'm just not going to be able to move. So I got to make sure that those who are actually influencing it are totally aligned with this goal. So I have to have a circle of early adopters who actually realize the vision and they want to move. And then you deal with these people separately. You continue to convince, And I think one thing that helps is if you have some early successes, that helps a lot, because as soon as you have early successes, you have more to talk about with this group of people and say that they begin to understand that some of their fears are actually pretty well taken care of, because now they can see the results. But I'm not going to say it's not a problem. It's always a problem. But you just have to make sure that you're communicating, you're engaging all the time, but you're making sure that those people who haven't bought in to what you're doing are not in a situation where they can influence the change.
You talked earlier, you started your life as a chartered accountant, sort of moving through in a finance background. I just want to talk a little bit about the role of a CFO and how that roles of a CFO, and looking at firstly at what is a CFO meant to do, right? Because it's not doing the books. And I saw you wrote a wonderful piece back, I think about 2009, around the role of a CFO,
right?
And then how that has affected you and how that's led to into your journey as a CEO, and how that's helped, or maybe even hindered, your journey to be a CEO and a leader.
Yeah. So there's two sides to it, I think. There's the CFO specialist role, where it's all about the technicalities of the finance function, which is a huge topic in itself, and it's all about the ability to manage the finances of the organization, the ability to make the right investments, the ability to raise money, and all of those issues, the financing decisions, the investment decisions, the managing the risk. So that's the specialist aspect of the CFO. But the CFO also plays a very important role as an advisor to the CEO.
Yes.
And in kind of being a mirror for the CEO. I mean, those of us who have been in CEO positions, CEO leadership is a very lonely position, right? You know that, Ian. You need somebody to come and tell you the things that nobody else is going to do that. The CFO should be that person. And that can only be done if the CFO has such a deep understanding of the business that he's actually able to walk into that room with the CEO and tell him that here is how I look at it, even if it's different from the CEO's vision, or even if it's a modification. So that is extremely important. The article that you were referring to talked a lot about post-merger acquisition, because that was the time when companies were being acquired, and one of the serious problems that we were encountering then was that whereas it was relatively easy to acquire a company, there is a way that you do it technically. What was extremely difficult was making sure that once you've acquired the company, now you have two totally different cultures, totally different management teams, totally different, in some cases, even business models. How do you get these two together? And I think there was a statistic that only 20 or 30% of M&As actually succeed in terms of integration. So post-merger integration was a huge topic. It was very interesting for me, and in fact, in one of the roles that, as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time working on that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting statistic how many mergers fail, or maybe just don't achieve the gains that were envisaged.
Yes.
And I think there isn't anything like enough attention paid to that the integration of the people, integration of the systems, which leads to, I guess, suboptimal results.
Yes.
But your role as a CFO and your understanding as a CFO, how's that then helped you be a better or different leader and CEO?
As a CEO, absolutely, because I think once you enter into the CEO role, then you spend such a lot of time thinking about the future, because that's something that nobody else in the team is really going to think about as much as the CEO should. That's the primary responsibility of the CEO, is to have the vision for the organization. So you spend such a lot of time on that there is always the risk that you might be too focused on the exploration part of it and compromise on the sustainability aspect. You might not focus on the risks as much as you ought to. You might not be measuring progress as frequently and as accurately as you should do that. And this is where the CFO background plays a huge role with that ability, first of all, to understand the numbers. In your heart of hearts, you continue to remain a CFO. You'd never lose that. And so when you see a financial statement or you see reports, it gives you that excitement. You want to look at the numbers. And that's very useful, I think, for a CEO because it grounds you. You're looking at these, you're looking at the future, and there's the promise that we talked about, and there's all of the possibilities. But at the same time, you're making sure that you do have the right measures in order to evaluate your performance, and you also have the ability to change tracks if required. And that I think and more so in the current state of affairs, where you have the kind of geopolitical disruptions that you see, and you have supply chain disruptions. These have been going on. You had the COVID pandemic and all of that. So changes is an absolute constant right now, and so the role of risk management becomes extremely important, where you don't go to either of the extremes. You don't go to an extreme where you're so conservative that you see a risk everywhere and you're not moving, and that's paralysis. But at the same time, every time you try and capture these new opportunities, you make sure that you've got yourself well covered. And I think that CFO background helps a lot.
Talking about change and the way the world is moving, we saw a major move towards sustainability within organisations, which is obviously quite different in our lifetime. Maybe we're seeing a bit of a pullback with the new administration in the US at the moment. But you've always played a fairly major role in driving sustainability in organisations, from the electric logistics in Thailand to low carbon cement. How have you been able to balance innovation, environmental impact, and economic outcomes for the actual organisation? How have you been able to balance that?
So at the initial stages, I'm lucky that our company laid out a very clear policy about our transition towards net zero. And so that became a guideline for all of us. And so moving towards sustainable businesses was a very clear goal. And we did have the privilege of moving towards sustainability as long as we weren't allowed to lose money, but you didn't necessarily have to deliver sky-high profits, as long as you were, first of all, able to make the move towards sustainability, and eventually, of course, it has to be profitable. And so the initial years was all about moving quickly to greener products, green solutions, and making sure that you're managing the risks well enough. You're making sure that you're not burning cash, but you're very quickly, within, let's say, 6 months to a year, you're breaking even, and you're taking the business to a path of profitability. Yeah.
Looking at supply chains now, what's over your 30, 40 years, particularly the last 30 years, you've seen changes in supply chains. We're probably seeing some drastic changes in how leaders need to look at supply chains now, given the new administration in the US and how that is changing world trade.
Yeah.
How do you think leaders need to look at their supply chains? Obviously, how you've gone through your journey, but if you were looking at supply chains now, how's the world going to be different given what's happening with the uncertainty with tariffs? How would you be looking at that now if you were leading a supply chain organisation?
Right. I think the fundamentals of value continue to remain, but delivering that value has become more difficult now. with the geopolitics and with the tariff changes and all of that. But fundamentally, what is extremely important, and even more important given today's situation, is to know who your customer is. And as basic as it might sound, it is not that clear in many companies. So you know very clearly who that customer is and what is it that is the pain point, and making sure that the value that I have, the capability that I have to deliver is unique, and it clearly solves that customer's pain point. And that is something that is getting more and more important. So I can give you an example of trading, which is what I've been doing for the last 7 years, actually, in my latest role. And the conventional trading, especially cross-border trading, was extremely easy at a time when there was an information gap. So if you look at the business, then you ask yourself, why am I able to trade? And it's because there's a gap in information. So let's say you, Ian, have some unique products, and there's a customer sitting somewhere in the world, somewhere in Saudi Arabia, and that customer actually needs those products, but you don't know that customer. The customer doesn't know you, so I come in and I close that information gap. That was the conventional model of trading. Doesn't apply anymore because you have the internet today. So you guys can just get to know each other online. You don't need me anymore, right? But the rationale for trading continues because there are other gaps. So you don't have an information gap, but you have an efficiency gap, which means that you might be able to sell those products to the guy in Saudi Arabia, but you don't have enough volumes to sell, and so you can't load the ship. And he doesn't have enough volumes to buy, and so logistically, he's probably paying a higher cost. So I can come in and say, you know what, you guys know each other, but I have more suppliers than you, Ian, and I have other customers than that guy in Saudi Arabia, so I can combine all of this, and I can do supply chain efficiency. And so I'm solving an efficiency gap. I could also tell the guy in Saudi Arabia he's buying a raw material and he likes to buy it from one supplier, and I can go and tell him that, look, it's geopolitics, it's disruption. You shouldn't depend on one supplier. You should have multiple suppliers. And he says to me, yeah, but I can do it myself. Why do I need you? And then I tell him that, look, there is an assortment gap. You can deal with 5 different suppliers, but are you going to go and inspect those products at the 5 different suppliers? Are you going to source from those 5 different suppliers? I can do that better than you because I source from them already because I have other customers. So I can come in and say, okay, I'm now closing the assortment gap. So you have to understand very clearly what's the need that you're closing, where's the gap and what am I closing? And finally, which is something that I'm very, very enthused with right now, very passionate about, is what I call the knowledge gap, which is a completely new way of trading where the new geopolitical situation, you go to a country and they say, we don't want to import anymore. We want the operation to be entirely local. So if you have got products to sell to me, why don't you just come and invest here and manufacture them locally? And that way we can create employment in our country and so on, right? But you, Ian, as the producer of the product sitting here in Thailand, you don't want to go probably to that country. That's where I come in as a trader. And I say, I understand your business and I can help partner with local companies so I can commercialize these products. There can be a knowledge transfer and I can play a role over there. So there's always a way by which you can close gaps. But the gaps that you are closing will continue to change depending on the period of time. So you see, I've given you a quick run through of what's been going on over the last 10 or 15 years. And I would argue that there is still a very, very important place for traders, for international traders. It's just that it's a different place than it used to be 10 years ago. Yeah.
And the future of Thailand? Given the current world, given the rise of Vietnam we've seen over the last 20 years, obviously they seem to have come to an agreement with the US. I'm not sure how great that agreement is. Thailand, where's Thailand positioned at the moment?
That's a very interesting question. It's also it's also one of the things that I'm very passionate about. I also play a role in the Thai Chamber of Commerce. I help with especially the South Asia and Middle East Committee and so on. I believe that in the past, Thailand has done a good job of promoting itself as a destination for the world. So you have the tourism model, and you have lately you have the Eastern Economic Corridor, where you're inviting foreign investors to come in. There's a lot of data centers and a lot of new age business, AI, and all of that, which is being encouraged by Thailand, which is good. The one thing that I think where we have a huge opportunity to do something in the future is to go outbound, which is to be competitive. I was reading, in fact, you've written a lovely article on sustainability, the 6 pillars of sustainability, yes. And you talk a lot about productivity and competitiveness. Now, if we're really going to be competitive, then we have to go out where it's competitive and play with the big guys, yes. Right? And you don't see Thailand outside of ASEAN. You see a lot in ASEAN, but outside of ASEAN, you don't see very much. You see the Koreans. You go to the Middle East, you go to South Asia, you go to other countries, you go to the US, you see the Taiwanese, you see the Koreans. But here's something that I think is very interesting and very important for Thailand. Thailand does have a lot of capabilities. We're excellent at food processing. We've got capabilities in building materials, construction materials. We have one of the most matured markets in this part of the world. And so there are things that we can contribute in the developing markets, especially in South Asia and Middle East. And that's something that we should really be looking at, is to go there, invest there, build local companies there, even build industrial estates, and show our unique capabilities. And that, I mean, we're a small country; it's just 70 million, and so to really grow, we should have more than just our local domestic demand at play. And the way you do that is you do some outbound investment is what I would think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few players, I guess, that have gone out.
Yes.
Amata's gone out. Yeah. CP is out.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Not too many. Yeah.
Just not enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I came here, certainly, it was almost actively discouraged for Thai companies to invest outside of Thailand. It was quite difficult.
That was the background of the 97 crisis, yes. Wasn't it? Because that crisis actually put the entire focus on risk.
Yes.
Correctly so, because never again do you want Thailand to be in that situation. And I respect that decision. But I think we've come a long way from there. And as I said right at the beginning, and there's the dark side of change and the bright side of change. So you have to manage that dark side. But at the end, you also have to look at the opportunities. Otherwise, you're just not going to grow.
We could talk for forever, because you have a fascinating life. But just to sort of, in conclusion, a few things. What advice would you give to future leaders that are looking to expand and scale their businesses internationally, but still remaining, agile and resilient? What advice would you give to them?
I think the first one would be, look, the world is a very, very different place from what it was 40 years ago when I started. It was competitive then, but it's much, much more, not just competitive, but also disruptive, uncertain, complex. And so my first advice would be, find your sweet spot. And the sweet spot is, there are things that you really like, but they're probably not the things that you're best at. Good example is, I really love cricket, right? But it's horrible. I was horrible. I couldn't play the game. But if you can find the sweet spot, which is that the overlap between the things that you really like, but you're also good at, so you're above average, and everybody has that. So if you can find that, that's what I tell my kids actually. That if you can find that as a sweet spot, something that you really love doing, you're passionate, but you're also good at it, then do that. Stick with it, because in this modern environment, you have the opportunity to do that. When I graduated, at that time, the internet had just kind of started, and we didn't have the kind of access to information which kids have nowadays. So that would be my first advice: is to find your sweet spot, stick with it. Another one would be the risk of burning out. for leaders, you're not going to talk very much. I know people talk about work-life balance, but there's going to be phases in your life as a leader where you're out of balance, right? Yes. And all you're thinking about is the work. And there's a possibility that there's burnout, but the burnout actually comes from stress. And the way I managed it in the later years, I learned it the hard way, is that on the one hand, I would be very passionate about what I was going to do, but there would be a stage, a phase when I'd said, I've done everything that I could, and now's the time that I'm going to wait for the results. I'm going to take a pause, and I'm going to be really calm and just wait for the results to come to me almost from the universe, if you like. Yeah. And I'm going to accept that. There's going to be only one of two things. Either it's going to be not what I wanted, or worse than what I wanted, or it's going to be better. If it's not going to be what I wanted, I have to just go back to the drawing board and see how I can get back again. And if it was what I wanted, then I get some confirmation and I move ahead. But that pause is very important. Not getting stressed out by the results. And finally, this is probably a bit controversial, but I think every leader should have something other than his or her work, where you're not focused on your individual identity, but you're really, really interested in something. So it could be you have an interest in nature. You just go to the mountains, and when you go there, it's your leisure time, and you just enjoy it so much that in those moments you're completely away from your normal self, and that leisure is something that we're missing out a lot in the modern lifestyle, and that's very important. For me personally, I have an interest in spiritual matters, so I study a lot about that. Right. And I have found that being away from yourself, as it were, for even a few minutes in a day or a few hours in a week is something that helps a lot.
If you were to look at your life, has it been, whether it be close to you or just in the public arena, is there a leader that's really inspired you? Is there someone, if you look at it, I ask everyone this.
Yeah.
Is there a particular leader that says?
There's one that I would definitely talk about because everybody knows him, and then there's another person which is very personal to me. So the first one is Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. Mm-hmm. And the reason I feel inspired by him is that, of course, he's right in the center of innovation, and he's heading a company that is right in the forefront of innovation and all of that. But at the same time, he's very collaborative and very humble, and understands how to bring in other ideas. And so this balance between being in a place which is right at the forefront of creativity and innovation, but at the same time being grounded, is, I think, extremely inspiring to me. So the second is my mother.
Right.
And she was a housewife and a teacher. And so, in fact, the first year that I started my education as nursery, I was actually kicked out of the school because I was crying all the time until the principal said he's not prepared for school. And so my mother actually spent a year teaching me. And she was so serious about that she didn't allow me to read comics. In those days we had Archie's comics and all that. Right, yes. And she wouldn't let me read them because that's going to spoil your English. So she's a bit of a disciplinarian, but at the same time in the later years she taught me a lot about life, about the important things, and so as a guide, both from an emotional point of view and also I would say spiritually, she had a great influence on me. So I would say she's a great leader for me.
Well, let me say, I think she's done a fantastic job. You've the organisations you've been with, I think, have been very lucky to have you. I think you just the way you articulate the journey, articulate the leadership, articulate how organisations should fund, I think has been fascinating, and really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been great having you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ian.
Okay.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, some fantastic lessons there. To everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to Confessions of a Leader. We'll be back soon with more conversations from Thailand's most accomplished leaders. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep leading.